Guess who came over for lunch? With the future of Venezuela on the menu, what we know about Maria Corina Machado's first face-to-face meeting with President Trump. The temperature turns up in the Twin Cities as violent immigration raids continue, while threats on Iran are walked back as more sanctions are put in place. Plus, throw in the game for monetary gain. Feds call foul on the alleged case of corruption in college sports. Hello, I'm Ed O'Keefe in Washington, in for Major Garrett, who's still out somewhere on a baseball field. He'll be back tomorrow, don't worry. But welcome to the Takeout. If there's one thing this reporter's learned in his handful of years covering the White House, it's that you can measure the importance of a meeting, or how much the White House wants you to know about it, based on which way the invited guest gets into the building. Your world leader and close ally, or one of those dignitaries a president really likes, you're likely getting an arrival like this. Full military honors, the bands, and maybe even, yes, a flyover. Look at that. That was for the Saudi Crown Prince. If you're a leader who the president respects, from a country the U.S. has to do business with, or maybe one of those leaders who visits quite often, well, you get to do this. They line up service members along the driveway. They are holding flags of the various U.S. states. Your black car rolls right up to the front door of the West Wing. But just about everyone else goes in through one of the side doors. There's one right there on 17th Street, the southwestern corner of the White House complex, where reporters rarely go. And that's where Maria Corina Machado arrived today, whisked through security with no fanfare. To be fair, she's not a head of state or head of any major international body, but she is the leader of an opposition movement that decisively won an election 2 years ago that Nicolas Maduro ignored. President Trump is skeptical Machado can lead Venezuela's military, control its vast oil supply, and rally public society to help rebuild the country. So for now, she was snuck in through the side entrance. Her goal is to one day be invited in through the front door, with the bands playing in her honor. For more on Lunch with Maria Corina Machado, we begin at the White House with our Weijia Zhang. Weijia, good to see you. Happy Thursday. What do we know now about how lunch went?
Well, Ed, we know one thing that I was just able to confirm a short time ago from White House officials, because, of course, Maria Corina Machado is not just the opposition leader in Venezuela. She is the most recent recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize. And I am told that during this lunch, she presented the real medallion to President Trump and gave it to him. Of course, this is an award that he has long wanted. And apparently, even before this, she mentioned that she was going to give it over to him. And that's exactly what happened. But, it's interesting because even before we learned anything about what happened during this meeting at the Nobel Peace Center, sent out a post on social media to say that the medal can change owners, but the title of a Nobel Peace Prize laureate cannot. In terms of what they talked about, where do you even begin, right? Because there is so much to say with regard to the future of Venezuela. And it might have been a little bit awkward because President Trump said early on, after capturing Maduro, Nicolas Maduro, of course, earlier this month, that he didn't think Machado had the chops to lead Venezuela. He said she lacked the respect and the support of people who live there. So I asked the White House press secretary today if that remains the case. Here's what she said.
Is it still the president's assessment that it would be very hard for Ms. Machado to leave Venezuela because he says she lacks the respect and support in that country? And will he raise that with her today?
I think the president's assessment that you just pointed out was based on realities on the ground. It was a realistic assessment based on what the president was reading and hearing from his advisors and national security team. And at this moment in time, his opinion on that matter has not changed.
He has also said that he would like there to be elections in Venezuela when the time is right.
That's right.
Do you have any update on when that might be? And is he committed to a transition to democracy for Venezuela?
Yes, and he is also committed to hopefully seeing elections in Venezuela one day, but I don't have an updated timetable for you today.
Of course, President Trump has said many times that the U.S. would be running the country, or is running the country, Ed.
Do we have any sense, if the conversations he had with the interim president, Delcy Rodriguez, last night, the lunch today with Machado, changes his view that Rodriguez is still the best person? I mean, we know, certainly you and I know from covering him on a regular basis, that he's often most influenced by the last person he talked to. Is there any indication yet that his views on all this have changed?
I think it'll take much more than a lunch, Ed, for him to change his views, because just yesterday he said that Rodriguez is a terrific person, indicating that they are working well together and that, frankly, she is on board with the president's plans, which at the center are his plans to control and rebuild Venezuela's oil reserves. In fact, just yesterday, the White House announced the first sale of sanctioned oil that is now in the hands of the U.S. We don't know who it was sold to. We don't know how the profits are going to be distributed. But this is all part of his plan to make some extra money for Venezuela, but also for the U.S. And so as long as Rodriguez is on board with that, and it appears she is, in the interim, it seems like he is happy with her. Of course, that question that I asked Caroline, when there might be elections, that's what really matters in terms of the future for Venezuela and whether a democracy will ever actually exist there. But before I say bye, I also have to say, Ed, that I love your blazer tonight.
Oh, well, thank you. I had no idea you'd be wearing the same shade, but hey. On Thursdays, apparently, we wear burgundy. Weijia Jiang over at the White House. Good to see you. Thank you for that. And we'll be in touch for more on today's key meeting between the president and the opposition leader. We are joined by Charles Shapiro. He served as the U.S. ambassador to Venezuela during the George W. Bush administration. Ambassador, so great to have you with us, because you're one of those few Americans who was, paid to study these things and to live there and to understand society and whatnot. And as you observed the last 15 days, since Maduro's extraction from his home country, do you see a world where Maria Corina Machado ends up running Venezuela?
Well, I sure hope so. Let's put it that way. Look, their polling data is out now, came out yesterday. Venezuelans are delighted that Maduro's gone, but they also, the most popular politician in Venezuela right now, according to the polls, is Maria Corina Machado. One of the least popular politicians in Venezuela right now is Delcy Rodriguez. I mean, remember, what we did is we got rid of Maduro, but we kept his cabinet. We kept his henchmen, including Delcy Rodriguez. So the idea that suddenly she's going to be popular, that she's got the support of the Venezuelan people, is just incorrect.
And I think that's one of the things that's been so hard to capture over the last 2 weeks is the mood on the ground, the opinion of people in a very large country. We know those that are outside Venezuela who want to go back are obviously eager to do so and eager to see the change. But to this poll that you mentioned, it's a signal, a reminder perhaps to the administration that she remains quite popular. Knowing all that, what do you think she probably should have brought up today to hasten the process to eventually get to the point where free elections are held and maybe she has a shot at becoming president?
I'd actually look at it the other way around, is that in a way, both President Trump and Maria Corina Machado need to build bridges to each other. The administration opted for stability over democracy. And it got stability in the short term and people are happy. But you know and I know that in any country in the world, is it going to be 30 days, 60 days, 180 days from now, things are going to happen. People are going to be unhappy with the government. The electricity is going to fail. The public employees are not going to get paid. Inflation is going to break out in Venezuela. Something's going to happen. And who are they going to blame? Donald Trump? Donald Trump needs somebody popular on the ground. And I'm not saying that she should take power tomorrow. We've got to work out, how do you do that? How do you phase it in so that you return to democracy? Venezuela's had 25 years of dictatorship. It's time to try democracy.
Yeah. Now, as someone who lived and worked on U.S. interests in Venezuela, you know a thing or two about what it takes to pump oil out of that country. Chevron has said in recent days they think they could double production in 2 years. You think that's feasible? Or how long might it take to actually redevelop that country's petroleum industry in such a way that the output is profitable to them and hospitable to the United States?
Chevron could double production on the Chevron concessions in Venezuela, which are in Western Venezuela and have lighter, easier to pump crude oil. The real challenge is in Eastern Venezuela, where ExxonMobil and ConocoPhillips were operating, is the oil is deep, it's very thick, it's hard to get out of the ground. Once it's out of the ground, it's too thick to even pump to the refineries. They've got to dilute it with a very expensive chemical to get it to the refineries. All of that needs to be rebuilt. And so that's where the challenge is, and that's where you see all these people talking about it would take $10 billion a year over 10 years to recuperate the oil industry in eastern Venezuela, in the Orinoco River oil belt.
Yeah. All right. So in other words, maybe Chevron can do it, but the rest of it will continue to take tens of billions of dollars over a decade plus. Charles Shapiro,
they're in different parts of the country. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we got to leave it there, unfortunately, but we'll have you back because you, like we said, you're one of the few who've been there over the course of this century and have a good understanding of it all. And we appreciate you taking the time today. Charles Shapiro joining us from Atlanta. Thank you.
Thanks, and I'll wear a maroon blazer next time.
Who knew this would become such a thing? Anyway, we move on and we turn back to Minneapolis and the ongoing clashes between the public and federal immigration and customs enforcement agents. An ICE officer shot a man during an arrest operation Wednesday night in Minneapolis after allegedly being attacked by men with shovels. In the wake of the latest wave of unrest, President Trump is threatening to use the Insurrection Act to deploy troops to the city. Governor Tim Walz, a Democrat, is now making a direct appeal to the president. He wrote in part, quote, "Let's turn the temperature down. Stop this campaign of retribution. This is not who we are." He also, of course, addressed the state last night as well. So we turn to Lana Zak, who is in Minneapolis following the latest developments. Lana, great to see you. We've seen a growing number of physical disputes between ICE agents and the public. Set the scene for us today there in Minneapolis. Has it gotten any better, any worse?
More volatile, I think, Ed, is how I would describe it. The tensions are high at this moment here at the vigil where Renee Good was killed just a week ago. Things are rather calm, but just a little bit away at the Whipple Federal Building, that's where agents have been bringing both targets of immigration enforcement and U.S. citizens who have been detained for protesting. Things have become explosive several times today. We've seen federal agents move in on the protesters, sometimes just pushing them back to the sidewalk, other times actually discharging what appears to be pepper spray and other types of pepper balls. Thank you. Our producer, Sean Herbert, over here is helping me out with that one. But we're still working to confirm some of the details of what we heard. And we have heard some significant stories, including from the state, that have alleged that agents have left a live grenade in a residential neighborhood. That's a pepper spray grenade. But all of this is leading to a situation where it doesn't feel like right now the temperatures are coming down. And just as an indication of that, Ed, earlier today, we saw 3 men walking down the street playing an anthem that's associated with neo-Nazis. Later, they showed up at the Whipple Federal Building. And so there are clearly some people who are spoiling for a fight.
Yeah, that's unfortunate to hear that continues. Do we know anything more now about that shooting last night that once again raised tensions and concerns that there would be such violence? In case, again, ICE agent shooting a Venezuelan national. ICE says they were there to pick him up. What else do we know?
Well, we know his name now, Julio Cesar Sosa Solis. We also know that the federal government tells us he was shot in the leg. He was taken to the hospital. So was the agent. They say the agent was acting out of self-defense after Sosa Solis attacked him with either a shovel or a broom handle. They say he was trying to flee arrest and was joined by 2 other Venezuelan nationals. But the details, again, are what people are disputing. And so the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension has announced now that they're going to do their own investigation into that incident. And that's significant given that they were frozen out of the federal investigation into Renee Good.
All right, Lana Zach there in Minneapolis. Thanks to you and your team for continuing to cover that. We'll be in touch. Now to the latest development in an issue that's been plaguing the world of sports. Federal prosecutors have charged roughly 24 people, including many college basketball players, in an illegal gambling probe. The FBI says a point-shaving scheme began in the Chinese Basketball Association in 2022 and then moved on to the NCAA basketball, where at least 29 games are said to have been fixed. Players were allegedly offered as much as $30,000 to rig the games. Here's what prosecutors said in a press conference earlier today.
The scheme here was the defendants would identify a game in which a corrupted player had a team that was favored to lose, and then they would bribe said player to deliberately underperform so that his team would lose by more than they were favored to. They would bet for them to not cover the point spread.
Goodness gracious. Well, Danny Funt joins us now from Charlotte. He's the author of Everybody Loses, The Tumultuous Rise of Sports Gambling, which coincidentally just happens to be coming out next week. What timing, Mr. Funt? Good to see you. We've seen point-shaving scandals like this before. There was the Boston College one back in the 1970s. There have been other instances in the last year or so. But what makes this one different now, of course, that sports gambling is legal?
I would say, for one, just how brazen it is. This is allegedly a scheme that covered dozens of programs, affected at least 29 games, as you said. And just the amount of money at stake, they were bribing players allegedly 10 to 30 grand per game if they facilitated this point shaving. And some of it is kind of staggering if you read the indictment, including how immediate this was. You had players in the locker room after they had fixed the final score of the first half, which is what a lot of these bettors were gambling on, saying things like, wow, that was so easy. It was so easy to fix a game. So it's hard to wrap your heads around how big this is for the NCAA and for sports.
And for college kids who, of course, if they're good, frankly, have the opportunity to be making big money now. This is not only big money, it seems like fast money. Because as I read parts of the indictment, they were getting that money pretty quickly after these games, right?
That's right. And I did find that an interesting component of this. You know, nowadays, college athletes, some of them make millions of dollars a year through these NIL deals.
Yeah.
And you might think, okay, it would be hard to corrupt someone who's already making that much money. Why would they risk throwing it all away by gambling or colluding with gamblers? And the vulnerability that people have explained to me that creates, and this sort of demonstrates, is it creates kind of a wealth gap within college sports. Obviously, not everyone's making millions. Many aren't making anywhere close to that, of course. And these alleged fixers targeted players for whom a bribe of 10 grand up to 30 grand a game was meaningful money and would help even things up between them and people they're playing with or against who are making much more through NIL. So it's a modern wrinkle to a age-old problem in college basketball.
Yeah, and you know, it's funny, and maybe your book gets into some of this, or maybe you've written about it before, but the idea that you're going to college with a guy who's good at a sport, or a woman, and they're making 6, potentially 7 figures for playing, and he's sitting next to you in like Econ 101, like how does that start to change the dynamic on campus? Of like, you know, traditionally college kids were all starving, right? They're all trying to figure out what they were going to do next. Now you've got these guys making huge sums of money, intermingling with all these other students who don't. You know, it just changes the dynamic of college overall, doesn't it?
It does, and it makes the threat of any sort of match fixing or trading on inside information, all of that so much greater just because you're rubbing shoulders with these players. Charlie Baker, the president of the NCAA, who's had a bit of a "I told you so" reaction to this news, he's been campaigning for quite a while to say states and even Congress need to rein in betting. When I spoke with him for my book, he pointed out that he hears stories of kind of a subtle form of coercion where a student will say to an athlete they're in class with or at the dining hall with or wherever, "Hey, I bet on you and you cost me money last game. Why don't you be sure not to score in the first half, or why don't you
Exactly.
give me an inside edge. That sort of stuff happens all the time now. And when these leagues, or even when the NCAA assures us, hey, we can police this, we can sniff out suspicious betting activity, that sort of stuff, it doesn't take a genius to figure, is impossible to police.
Yeah. Well, Danny, look, your book is well timed. I'm going to go pick up a copy because this continues to be a problem. Obviously, the leagues, the professional leagues say they think there may be an easier way to track this now that betting is legal. But again, the dynamic on campuses and what this kind of big money means for students, it is detrimental. So thank you for joining us. We'll have you back at some point to talk about this because it sounds like this issue isn't going away anytime soon. Good luck with the book.
Thank you, Ed.
Still to come on the Takeout, Elon Musk is facing a lawsuit from a woman he shares a child with over deepfakes of her undressed, made by his AI chatbot. What we know so far. Also, the 5 Democratic lawmakers who say they're now under investigation for calling on troops to reject unlawful orders, the latest on their fate. And the nationwide fight to redraw congressional districts now heads to Virginia. We look at attempts by Old Dominion Democrats to redraw their map. Stay with us. The Takeout returns in 90 seconds. Welcome back. Ashley St. Clair, the mother of one of Elon Musk's children, is suing Musk's artificial intelligence company. St. Clair says X's chatbot Grok is dangerous and poses a threat to the public. She claims users on X were using Grok to manipulate images of her, other women, and even children to undress them. Here's what she told our Jolene Kent this week before she filed the suit.
The worst for me was seeing myself undressed, bent over, and then my toddler's backpack in the background, because I had to then see that and see myself violated in that way and such horrific images, and then put that same backpack on my son the next day.
Jessica Levinson joins us now to break this down. Jessica, great to see you. What grounds does St. Clair have here to sue?
So it looks like that she's bringing something called a products liability case, essentially, and a public nuisance case, meaning that it looks like these are civil cases based in tort law. When it comes to the products liability theory, she's essentially saying that Grok is almost like a car or another product that's unreasonably safe, and there was an opportunity to make it safer. This is a fascinating situation where, as you know, we're tackling new technology under the rubric of older laws, and we're trying to figure out, can you treat AI, can you treat something like Grok as if it is a product that we all might know and use? Again, quintessential example being something like an automobile. And then there's a separate theory here, public nuisance, where the idea is that Grok is so unsafe that it actually creates a danger for a broad group of people, and that it almost functions in the same way as, for instance, environmental pollution. So we'll watch this case to see if these theories, which have been used in other situations, can be applied in this very new technology.
To your point about using new technology under old legal frameworks, do people own the rights to their likeness, or is AI still so new that it's hard to establish that, in fact, you do?
So I'll answer the first part in that there's actually a big body of law. I tell my students about it. We just started talking about it yesterday morning, of course, called appropriation, the right to publicity, where you do own your name or likeness for some purposes. And there's caveats here, but the basic rule is that you don't want people to be able to use your identity to the sense it's commercially exploitable for their commercial gain without asking you first. There's all these carve outs, for instance, for newsworthiness. That, of course, allows magazines and television shows and newspapers to function. In terms of AI, I don't know that that changes the analysis of whether or not you own your identity, your name or likeness, but it certainly will change the legal theories in terms of the cases people bring forward and the harms that they are alleging.
And I guess, Ashley St. Clair is one thing, other public figures is another. But if you're just, Joe or Jane, regular guy, do you have any recourse to stop this kind of thing from happening? It's not like you can pick up the phone and call X and say, take that down. I mean, what can the basic everyday person do to prevent this? Because it's happening all the time.
This is such an important question. And I think, one, Under the terms of service, I think that a lot of people are arguing there should be an opportunity, whether or not you have the public forum, whether or not you are somebody who can be interviewed on television, to say, take this information down, that should be a clear part of the terms of service for X or any other social media company. And that separately, what I would just say is, in this area of the law and others, there is an acknowledgement, and this is exactly to your question, which I think is so important, that public figures and private figures should be treated differently in a number of situations. That public figures avail themselves often of the public forum, and it means that they have the ability to grab a microphone or be in front of a camera and say, this thing happened to me and it's a problem. Whereas private figures don't have that same ability. And so there are areas where the law treats them differently. Again, this is developing. We have to see if that dichotomy is lifted into this claims based on this new technology.
Well, Jessica Levinson, thank you so much for breaking it down. I know we called on you sort of at the last minute to do that, but that's why we have you here, because you seem to know what you're talking about, and certainly on this. And fascinating that it came up just yesterday in your classwork with your students. Shows you how relevant it is and how important it is. Thank you so much. Talk to you soon. Next, we take you to Capitol Hill and check in on the 5 Democrats who say they're now under investigation for telling troops to not follow illegal orders. You're watching The Takeout. Welcome back to The Takeout. Here's a look at what else we're watching this evening. The Trump administration has imposed new sanctions on Iran due to the crackdown on protests in the country. Those sanctions target several Iranian security officials who the U.S. blames for the violence. Iran's opposition leader tells CBS News the protests have yet to reach a point where they'd attempt to topple the regime. The number 2 official at ICE, Madison Sheehan, is leaving her post to run for Congress in Ohio. Sheehan is a close ally of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem and was installed as the agency's deputy director in March. She's looking to flip one of the 13 congressional districts held by a Democrat that President Trump won back in 2024. Late this afternoon, Noem announced on social media that ICE's principal legal advisor, Charles Walz, will take over for Sheehan. Former Arizona Senator Kyrsten Sinema has been sued in federal court by the ex-wife of one of her former security guards, claiming the pair had a years-long extramarital affair. The lawsuit was filed in North Carolina, one of the few states in the union that allow a spouse the right to sue a third party whose actions allegedly cause a divorce or separation. The suit also accuses Sinema of asking her then security guard to bring drugs on a work trip, despite his history of mental health and substance abuse problems. And staying in North Carolina, Charlotte, the latest stop for a group of Buddhist monks on what they're calling a walk for peace. Nearly 24 monks are on day 81 of their 2,300-mile trek from Texas to Washington to promote peace, love, kindness, and compassion. Those who embarked on this journey say it's not a protest, just a bid to spread their message. They're expected to arrive here in the nation's capital on February 12th, just in time for Valentine's Day. 5 congressional Democrats who appeared in a video urging service members to refuse unlawful orders say they're under investigation. The president accused the lawmakers of seditious behavior over the November video. Here was one of them, Colorado Congressman Jason Crow, on Wednesday.
We are members of Congress. We will do our duty. We took an oath to this country to enforce the law, and that is exactly what we are going to do. And we will not allow any president to intimidate us and threaten us and dissuade us from performing our duty and fulfilling our oath.
Nicole Killian joins me now from Capitol Hill. Nicole, good to see you. What more do we know about the fate of these 5 Democrats? What more have they been asked for?
Well, we don't know a whole lot about the investigation and what the Department of Justice is seeking. Keep in mind that the FBI is also conducting an investigation into some of these lawmakers as well. But what they have all told us in various statements is that they will not be intimidated by the administration's actions, even as they see this as harassment.
And just a few minutes ago, we got word that the Senate Minority Leader, Chuck Schumer of New York, had himself a meeting today at the White House with President Trump. In other times, that would be sort of a normal thing, right? A Senate leader and the president meeting. But these two don't meet alone that often. Do we know what the meeting was about?
Yeah, that's right. It has been months since the president sat down with Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer. I believe the last time might have been just before the shutdown last fall. But in terms of this meeting, actually, according to a readout from Leader Schumer's office, he actually called for this meeting to express some concerns about the Gateway Tunnel project. This is a huge project in the New York City area, of course, to rehabilitate that tunnel under the Hudson River that many people may be familiar with, when they're taking the train. But that being said, that appeared to be the impetus for this meeting. However, the leader also discussed the expiring ACA subsidies, the Affordable Care Act subsidies that expired at the end of the year. Of course, Schumer just yesterday tried to get those extended after the House passed a bill, but he was blocked from doing so. And he also noted that he discussed the ongoing issue with respect to ICE, obviously in light of the tragedy in Minnesota with the president as well. So lots of ground covered, still waiting for a readout from the White House.
I guess it's encouraging, at least, that members of the opposing parties are meeting. But again, we'll wait and see what the White House has to say about all this. While we have you, real quick, the Senate, at least, is leaving for 10 days. There's a bunch of overseas trips by lawmakers next week. And they're leaving town having not resolved the issue of health care, as you mentioned. What happened to those talks? Is there any hope that when they get back in 10 days, they can take up something?
Well, I don't know. It seems like these talks are potentially taking a pause. That's certainly how Senator Bernie Moreno, who's been a key player in all of this, Republican from Ohio, put it to reporters earlier today, as did Alaska Senator Lisa Murkowski, who has been a proponent of some form of a bipartisan solution here. So, initially the hope was that they could get some legislative language out this week. Then that deadline pushed to after the Senate takes its recess next week. And now these lawmakers saying that things may be on pause. Of course, we also saw the president come out with his own health care plan today, where he talked about trying to lower cost and, be more transparent with patients, but unclear if and when Congress will take that up, even as the president directed Congress to. Majority Leader John Thune telling me that he hasn't gotten into the weeds yet of the president's new proposal.
Which makes you wonder how serious a proposal it might be, because, of course, this has been such a tricky issue for Republicans. Nicole Killian up on Capitol Hill. Congress may be out for the next 10 days, but you won't be. And we appreciate your reporting tonight. Good to see you. Virginia Democrats are pushing ahead with their plans to dramatically redraw yet another congressional map. We'll discuss what would happen if the Commonwealth's map is redrawn next and whether other states might follow suit. You're watching The Takeout. Virginia Democrats are moving ahead with a plan to redraw the Old Dominion's congressional maps and net Democrats up to 4 more House seats. Proposal to do so passed the state's Democratic-controlled House of Delegates on Wednesday and is now headed to the state Senate. Hunter Woodall has been following the nationwide redistricting campaign and joins me now. Good to see you, sir. Okay, this has gone from Texas to California, a bunch of other states, but Virginia now is ground zero. What have they done so far? What's next?
So the big thing is they're trying to amend the state constitution. That's what they have to do first, to actually get a ballot measure in front of voters well ahead of the midterms to say, hey, we want to redraw the state's congressional maps. You got 11 U.S. House seats in Virginia, 6 held by Democrats, 5 held by Republicans. There's talk, there's no certainty yet. We don't know what the map looks like, but there's talk of a 10-1 map, 10 districts that would favor Democrats, only 1 that could be won by a Republican.
That's going to be an awfully squiggly map, isn't it?
It's sure going to show some interesting dynamics, definitely. In the coming weeks, we should get a sense of what it looks like. We don't know yet.
That happens at the and what's interesting. Well, actually, the biggest question is: does that map apply to this November?
Yeah, the idea is that it would. They're trying to move things forward.
How is that not going to get challenged legally by someone?
It already has been, because it's interesting. Virginia Democrats had to actually pass this in 2 different sessions. They passed it last year in a special session. Mm-hmm. The governor's not involved, so Glenn Youngkin, the Republican governor, at that time, couldn't do anything to block it. Democrats have, a majority in the House and the Senate, but they had to pass it in one session, pass it in a second session before it can even go to voters. Republicans are really trying to challenge this, But obviously, they're making the kind of argument that you've heard other states make, and actually sort of like what Texas Democrats made when they're trying to hold up things, when Texas Republicans are redrawing that state's maps.
So let's remind people, we have a map of where redistricting has been signed into law. And it's essentially 4 states now have tweaked things. This one, there we go. There's the 5 in Texas, the 5 in California, 1 out of Missouri, and 1 more pickup potentially for Republicans in North Carolina. Virginia would end up scrambling the map by how many seats?
So the idea is it could be as many as 4 Republican seats.
So it's almost as monumental as Texas and California, in a much smaller place.
And that's the strange thing here is when Virginia started looking at this, Ed, the idea was, okay, they're going to counter what was going on. Republicans are trying in Texas. Now it seems to be Virginia could counter Florida, where GOP Governor Ron DeSantis is talking about redrawing that state's map. So
and that one would also apply for November, right?
Yes, that's the idea. So all this, we're not through with midterm shakeups yet. Anything could really happen, and it's also fluid. North Carolina really came out of the blue when that happened. Missouri might even, there's a ballot measure to try and get that map thrown out. That could freeze it for the midterm. So there's a lot going on, Ed.
And again, I think we have it. If we can show people where else there could potentially be changes made. Virginia is the one you've mentioned, Maryland, because the Democrats there are still trying to sort out whether they can make a run for it. And then Florida, where they could flip at least 3 more seats, which ultimately means we're looking at potentially 5, 10, another 14, almost 20 seats across the country potentially redrawn in such a way that the other party could pick it up.
The thing is, though, and really no party's going to come away with this with a huge advantage.
It's a wash.
So it's exactly, all this work is going to have gone into it. A lot of tensions between Republicans and Democrats, tensions, even in Congress. And at the end of the day, Republicans may have a slight advantage because they did this.
The only guys who benefited from it all are the lawyers. Hunter Woodall, not a lawyer, but a very good political reporter. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you soon. New polling shows a Democratic candidate has a 9-point lead in the Texas Senate primary, but it's not who you might think, at least in this poll. Our reporter panel takes a pulse check on that race and much more. Stay with us. You're watching The Takeout. Good to see you. Welcome back to The Takeout. There's been some surprising and early poll numbers in the closely watched Senate primary down in Texas that have caught our eye. State Representative James Talarico has a 9-point edge in this poll over Congresswoman and presumed frontrunner, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. Talarico notably polled very well with Latino voters across the state, which is a growing and important element of the Democratic primary electorate in that state. The first round of the primary, of course, is on March 3rd. Let's bring in our reporter panel. Oriana Gonzalez covers politics and policy for NOTUS, N-O-T-U-S, which stands for?
News of the United States.
Excellent. And Eleanor Muller reports on Congress for Semaphore, which is a word in the English language. And if you like your news in yellow, you should check out Semaphore. You'd understand why. Good to see both of you. Okay, let's start with this Texas race. Oriana, do these numbers surprise? What do Democrats here in Washington who are watching this one closely make of this?
I want to say that they're not surprising, actually. NOTUS has been following this race particularly closely. And what my colleagues, actually, Daniela Diaz and Alex Rorty, found recently was that a lot of the donors that Jasmine Crockett has are people that have donated to Trump in the past. So think the Winklevoss brothers, Lockheed Martin's PAC, the Coinbase CEO. Again, people that have given money to Republicans and Trump in the past. And that has alarmed a ton of Democrats, consultants, strategists, and officials who say that that means that Crockett is not the progressive candidate that she says that she is. And so it gives Talarico an advantage in the race.
And part of the reason those Republicans might be donating to her is in hopes that she wins and makes it easier for Republicans to hold on to the seat, right?
Precisely.
Yeah. What do you think, if anything, it would take to have Democratic leadership get involved in this one? Because so far they've been like, we're going to let this one play out.
They've been very diplomatic, not just in this race, but in a lot of races across the country, even in the House, where Democrats are obviously building as strong and offensive as they can going into the midterm elections. It's been interesting to watch, especially today, what's happening on the other side of the aisle in this race. We saw Senate Majority Leader John Thune basically say that they've tried to get the president to endorse Senator John Cornyn,
who is the incumbent in this contest.
Who is the incumbent. Right. and he doesn't think that they'll be able to deliver. John Cornyn was asked about it. He said there's only one person who knows why Trump hasn't endorsed, and presumably he was referencing God. And so interesting GOP tension over, having a majority that maybe is not your perfect majority, but is certainly better than a minority.
Right, because the concern is if Cornyn loses the primary in a three-way race to the Attorney General, Ken Paxton, who's not a very popular figure statewide because of all sorts of scandal, the Democrats could conceivably pick it off, but then Republicans think there's no way Jasmine Crockett could win a statewide race. Talarico, who's, a minister from the Austin area, presents differently, is a more traditional, maybe Texas statewide figure. We'll see. Starts March 3rd. There's a second round. We'll go from there. I wanted to talk to Eleanor about this reporting you had on the first $500 million oil deal that the U.S. has cut for Venezuelan oil, which signals that the process of moving that oil out and someone at least making money for it is underway. What do we know?
We know very little. I was saying right before we came on the air, there's a lot of unanswered questions here. Oil companies are trying to get answers. Members of Congress are trying to get answers. We don't really know who the oil was sold to. We don't know what happens to it at this stage. An administration official told my colleague Shelby Talcott that the revenue was being placed in a Qatari bank account. We don't know for sure why they elected to do that. I think I spoke to someone.
A bank in Qatar.
A bank in Qatar, and I spoke to someone today.
Not like the branch office of Bank of America in Doha,
no.
But a Qatari bank.
Yeah, the thinking is that maybe by doing so, they could remove it even further from some of Venezuela's creditors who might otherwise try to tap some of those funds to pay their debts. It sounds like that might not be an entirely foolproof way to do it, but either way, we've seen very little clear signaling from the White House on what exactly to expect when it comes to how this oil is sold and how the proceeds are then funneled back to the Venezuelan people.
But a chance for the White House to say, see, momentum is moving, the oil's moving, and we're helping make that happen. Oriana, one of the things I wanted to touch on in our remaining moments is this Supreme Court ruling that now lets candidates challenge election laws. You might think to yourself at home, why couldn't they already do that? Explain how it could affect this year's contests.
So before this ruling, it was very difficult for candidates to establish what's known as standing in order to bring a lawsuit and challenge voting laws. You really had to prove that somehow you were harmed by these laws. And so a lot of them were dismissed. What happened yesterday was that the Supreme Court essentially said, if you are a candidate, that is enough. That's enough of a reasoning to say, I want to challenge a voting law, be it having to do with mail-in ballots, but have it to do with just anything at this point. And we know that Republicans have been really calling for election reform, particularly led by President Donald Trump, who has been saying that, the election of 2020 was stolen and such. And so what this means is that leading up to 2026, what we could see is a flood of lawsuits from candidates challenging voting laws ahead of the election, or how Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson said in her dissent, if someone loses in an election by a landslide, they could just challenge the results if they wanted to and say, you know what? Okay, sure, I lost by 80% of the vote. I think the mail-in ballot law did not do good for me. So I'm going to challenge that one.
So
and
if
they
anything,
have standing.
it just prolongs the official tallying of a result and announcing it. And that is the expectation that critics of this ruling are anticipating, is that you're now going to see people, whether they're the, mainstream candidate or a fringe candidate, step in and just file lawsuits to try to muck up results.
Exactly. And I would say not just critics, but I was talking to Mike Bost, I was talking to Mike Kelly, for example. He was a Republican. He's from Pennsylvania. He challenged Pennsylvania's voting laws in 2020. His lawsuit was dismissed. And I asked him about this because I was like, what if this happened before? And he essentially said that this could inspire other candidates to do the same that he did.
We'll see what happens. To be continued. Oriana Gonzalez, Eleanor Mueller, thank you both for being here. Appreciate it. That does it for the Takeout today. Major's back tomorrow. I'll see you next week from the World Economic Forum in Davos. But for now, the Daily Report is coming up next.